G'day everyone, Rune here. While my first Pokemon What If is on hiatus thanks to writer's block, I've decided to spice things up a little with a what if I haven't seen anyone else tackle. What if Ash became a Pokemon Ranger? Now, I can see why this idea hasn't been used. The Ranger games only existed on the DS console, they've only appeared in the anime for one standalone episode, two-part episodes, and a movie, and it's never entirely clear how they work in the anime world. From what I understand, they protect specific areas that are strictly no-catching zones while also acting as a police force. Even though Officer Jenny and police departments are a thing. And they all seem to be working as an international organization despite the international police being a thing. And on top of that, there seem to be two different forms of Pokemon Ranger. The ones that use Pokeballs and the ones that use Stylers. The best way I could think to clean this up and explain exactly who does what was this. The Pokemon Rangers that use Stylers are an international law enforcement group that specialize in threats specifically aimed at nature and Pokemon, as the international police and local police groups also need to deal with petty crimes and such enacted on other humans. The Rangers that function basically as trainers have the same job, but on a more local level, so they operate within specific regions. Now, before we get into the story proper, there are a few things I need to clear up here because I don't know if I'll get a chance later. First off, in terms of how the Pokemon Rangers are going to be run, I'm going to be taking heavy inspiration from the games, as the anime basically gives us nothing. Second, in terms of story, I'm going to be taking inspiration from all corners of the Pokemon canon. That means that some aspects of the story will come from the anime, while others will come from the main games, the Ranger games, and even the manga. Third, each of the Pokemon seasons is going to take place over the course of a year. The reason for this is that while looking up how old the main characters of the Pokemon Ranger games are, I found that the common consensus is that they are 14 at the youngest. So, while trainers can start a journey at 10, Ash would still have at least 4 years to wait before becoming a ranger. Also, it never made sense to me how Gary can be apprenticing at a lab at age 10, and there are a few times where the way he's drawn and voice acted makes him seem older than Ash, which really makes no sense since they're supposed to be the same age. So, in this series of events, Ash and his friends will be aging, at least until Ash turns 14. After that, we'll see. Fourth, thank you to all of those that voted on my New What If Help video. Your votes and comments really helped me look into a lot of different avenues and made writing this series a heck of a lot of fun. And finally, apparently 67% of my viewers are not subscribed. So either I get a lot of looky-loos, or a good chunk of my regulars are not subscribed. Now, if you don't have an account and can't subscribe, or you're just a casual viewer that isn't trying to keep up with the videos regularly, I get that. But if you watch these videos regularly and can subscribe, it would really mean a lot to me if you did. With all of that out of the way, let's get into our story. We start this story way back, when Ash was still a little kid. The day he got caught in a storm and helped some Pokemon into the shelter of a tree. While he's sheltering there with the Pokemon, two people soon approach him. They're wearing bright red cropped jackets and have these strange little devices sitting in holsters on their hips. The two strangers approach Ash quickly, asking if he's alright. Ash assures them that he's fine and that the Pokemon were keeping him safe. They introduce themselves as Jack Walker and Solana, and explain that they are Pokemon Rangers that were sent to look for him. Lifting the little Ash onto his shoulders, Jack and Solana begin to take Ash home. On the way, they come across some Pokemon that are panicked by the storm and lashing out around them. Quickly putting Ash down, Jack tells Ash to stay back while he and Solana calm the Pokemon down. Ash watches in awe as the two Rangers calm the Pokemon with their Stylers. However, his attention is drawn away from them by a tiny Rockruff trembling in fear. Carefully, Ash approaches the frightened Pokemon, holding up his hands and talking in a smoothing manner, trying to calm it down. When Jack and Solana turn around, they see Ash gently comforting the Pokemon, soothing it and calming it. Jack slowly approaches, taking care not to frighten the Rockruff. He then kneels down next to Ash and says that he would make a fine ranger. Ash, startled by the praise, asks if he really thinks so, which Jack reaffirms. When Ash is returned safely home, he can't stop thinking about what Jack had said. He thinks about how the Rangers had calmed the panicked Pokemon so easily, how safe and at home he felt with the wild Pokemon, and how Jack thought he would make a good ranger. He imagines what it would be like to be a Pokemon Ranger as he falls asleep, a small smile on his face. This encounter marks the beginning of Ash's new goal to become a Pokemon Ranger. After a few hours of research, he discovers that there are actually only a handful of rangers from Kanto. This is because the region has very few wildlife preserves, so there's not much opportunity for young people to learn about them. He continues his research and discovers that there is a Pokemon Ranger school in Almina, which is 2 regions over. This causes his excitement to deflate a bit as he thinks that there is no way his mom would let him go so far away. Noticing her son's damp mood, Delia asks what's wrong, and Ash, nervously, explains that he wants to be a ranger, but the school that trains them is in Almia. Delia comforts her son, telling him that it's not the end of the world as he has a good 8 years to go before he can even apply. At Ash's confusion, Delia explains that children at age 10 can begin Pokemon journeys, but you need to be at least 14 before you can apply for Ranger School. This cheers up Ash significantly as not only did his mom not say an outright no, she basically just told him that she approves of his dream. Now, I should explain about Ash's relationship with Gary in this timeline. As Ash is not aiming to be a Pokemon Ranger, this means that the two would not have a rivalry and would actually still be friends. I see this new dynamic as very Sonic and Tails, with Gary being the Sonic of this situation, being a bit brash but kind-hearted overall, and Ash being the Tails, the brains and voice of reason who, despite always being down for an adventure, is usually the one that has to remind his friend not to do something stupid. Due to this dynamic, Gary asks Ash if he would like to tag along on his Pokemon journey. After all, Ash wouldn't be able to go to Ranger School for another 4 years, and this could be a good opportunity to learn more about wild Pokemon. Besides, he was Gary's best friend in like 80% of his impulse control. They also do still get their broken in half Pokeball, but here it's a symbol of their friendship, like a friendship bracelet. On the day that Ash and Gary are to start their journey, Gary has to go over to Ash's house in the morning to make sure he's up on time. Yeah, Ash's new career goal isn't going to change the fact that he is not a morning person. And Gary isn't about to let Ash miss the moment that he chooses his first Pokemon. After dragging his still half-asleep friend out of the house, the two make their way to Professor Oak's lab. Upon arriving at the lab, Oak greets the two warmly, thanking Ash for deciding to travel with Gary since he'd get into so much trouble on his own. Gary expresses annoyance at that, but does have to agree that he probably would. With that, Oak leads them to the 3 Pokeballs that he has prepared for first trainers. And, just like in canon, Gary chooses Squirtle. Ash congratulates Gary on his new Pokemon, and Oak asks if he would like to take a Pokemon as well while he's there. Ash declines, explaining that he's going to be a ranger one day, not a trainer. Ash and Gary begin their journey, and almost immediately, Gary catches a Spearow before then racing off to find other Pokemon to catch, with Ash trailing behind with a sigh. By the time they get to Viridian, it's dark and Gary has caught a Spearow, 2 Pidgey, a Rattata, and an Oddish. Ash asks what Gary intends to do now that he has a full party. Gary laughs lightheartedly at Ash's question, explaining that he isn't going to have just one team for the whole journey. Besides, he wasn't just aiming to be a top trainer, he was aiming to be a Pokemon master, and that meant catching and training every kind of Pokemon there is. Just as the two are starting to get settled at the Pokemon Center, Team Rocket bursts in with their usual plot to steal the center's Pokemon. Gary tells Ash to help Nurse Joy while he deals with the crooks. As Ash doesn't have any Pokemon of his own, there's not much he can do. Gary fights Team Rocket with his newly caught Pokemon, however, as they're all freshly caught, Gary hasn't had any time to train them, so they're all pretty easy pickings for Jesse and James's Ekans and Koffing. Ash, noticing that Gary is in trouble, spots a large group of Pikachu among the Pokemon in the center. Rushing up to the Pikachu, Ash pleads for their help, saying that if they don't fight, Team Rocket is going to take every Pokemon in the center. Back over with Gary, with all of his Pokemon out of the fight, he resorts to his own fist to try and protect the Pokemon and his friend. Unfortunately, he's a 10-year-old human, so his attack does nothing. Just as it looks like he's about to get taken out by Jesse's Ekans, a little yellow form shoots out, knocking the Ekans back. Gary looks around to see that he's now surrounded by Pikachu. Ash steps forward, telling Team Rocket that they made a big miscalculation by trying to steal from the center. Because while, yes, there are a lot of Pokemon in the center, that means that there are also a lot of friends. Friends that won't allow their friends to be stolen away. Ash calls on all the Pikachu to hit Team Rocket with a unified Thunderbolt. And like that, Team Rocket is blasting off again. Gary compliments Ash on his ability to communicate with the Pikachu and convince them to help him, to which Ash bashfully says that it's one of the most basic parts of being a ranger. Though they both have to admit that those three weirdos have them worried. They may have made it out against Jesse, James, and Meowth, but there was no guarantee they would the next time. Deciding to be more careful from then on, they continue their journey. After some more catching and training, Ash and Gary arrive in Viridian Forest. There, Gary once again goes into a catching frenzy. Ash sighs and decides to wander off a little, where he is confronted and attacked by Samurai. Samurai asks if Ash is a Pokemon trainer from Pallet, to which Ash hastily explains that he is from Pallet, but he's not a trainer. He doesn't even have a single Pokemon. Surprised to hear this, Samurai asks why Ash is traveling through Viridian Forest alone without any Pokemon, as that is very dangerous. Ash calmly explains that he's not actually traveling alone, he's accompanying a friend of his. If Samurai liked, he could introduce them, provided Samurai promised not to go swinging that sword of his. Samurai sheepishly agrees. They find Gary just as he's caught yet another Pokemon, this time a Pikachu, which he happily shows to Ash. He then asks who the kid in the costume is, and Ash introduces Samurai. Samurai asks for a battle, which Gary eagerly accepts. Using his flying types, Gary is easily able to take the win, and the two friends continue on their way. Just as they're entering Pewter City, however, they come across a group of Team Rocket agents, not Jesse, James, and Meowth, who are chasing an injured Rockruff. Without hesitation, the two boys jump in to protect the injured pup. Unfortunately, these grunts are a lot tougher than the Team Rocket we all know. However, despite being obviously outmatched, Gary and his Pokemon refuse to give up, getting back up each time it seems that the grunts have knocked them down. This tenacity allows them to buy just enough time for Brock, the Pewter Gym Leader, to arrive. Seeing the Gym Leader, the grunts decide to cut their losses and run. After giving Brock an explanation, the group all make their way to the Pokemon Center as quickly as possible, both for the Rockruff and Gary's Pokemon. While they wait for news about their Pokemon, they all sit in the lobby in silence. Gary is taking this very hard. His Pokemon put in everything they had, and it still wasn't enough to defeat those rocket grunts. Brock tries to assure Gary that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and he and his Pokemon did exceedingly well considering they were up against crooks with much more experienced Pokemon. This makes Gary feel a little better, though he still feels rotten over not being able to protect his friend. Finally, Nurse Joy comes back, informing them that all of the Pokemon will make a full recovery. Ash asks to see the Rockruff, and Joy leads them to the room where it's lying on the bed, covered in bandages. Seeing the Rockruff on the mend, Ash feels a rush of relief as he walks up to it. Smiling down at the Rockruff, Ash tells her that he's happy she's alright. The Rockruff is frozen for a second before she launches herself at Ash, knocking him over as she nuzzles his face and licks his cheek. Everyone in the room is startled for a moment before Ash notices that one of the stones around Rockruff's neck is different from the others. It was a dark blue crystal with what looked like little flecks of white light speckled through it. Seeing it causes Ash to remember the night that he got lost when he was a little kid, and had been inspired to become a ranger. Ash realizes that this Rockruff was the same Rockruff that he'd met in the forest all those years ago. Brock wonders if the strange stone at Rockruff's neck was Team Rocket's doing, reasoning that it would explain why they were so determined to capture her. Ash says that it doesn't matter because whatever Rocket's reason for hunting Rockruff, he's not going to let them have her. Gary agrees before suggesting that Ash take Rockruff as his partner Pokemon. At Ash's protest, Gary reminds him that every ranger has at least one partner that travels with them. Why couldn't Rockruff be his? She certainly seemed fond enough of him. Looking down at the pup in his arms, Ash smiles, saying that he really likes the sound of that idea. He even decides to give her a name, as she would be his main and likely only partner. From that day on, her name would be Crystal. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as we witness Gary's first gym battle, our team of heroes gain a new member, and watch as they get wrapped up in things far bigger than they could have ever imagined. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.